This is Harvard on the Map, presented by the Harvard Graduate School of Design, covering innovative ideas and thought leaders in digital cartography, Earth observation, and all things geospatial, with your host, Jennifer Horowitz.
Hello, and welcome to Harvard on the Map. I'm here with Griffin van Horne, who is a co-founder of Traintrackr, which I'll let him explain it. I first met Griffin as a TA or TF for a C's course I was taking this past semester, and he was a great TF, and then also has this super cool company. And so thanks for coming on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can you tell some of the viewers about Traintrackr?
Yeah. So Traintrackr, we make circuit boards that serve as a kind of bridge the gap between functional art and actionable data. So our most popular products right now are subway train trackers that show live locations of all of the subway data for Boston, New York, San Francisco, London, and this year we're going to be coming out with Washington D.C. and most likely Chicago as well. Yeah, so it's we started at the Cambridge Hackspace in Somerville in Union Square. Richard, my co-founder, has designed over 100 different circuit boards that involve just LEDs and clocks and just kind of basic LED circuit boards. And he was always prototyping these at the makerspace. And he's described it as, he was kind of fascinated by having access to the live data that the MBTA makes available. And has worked a lot with LED boards in the past, and just kind of saw this as a natural natural match, and was really excited with the results. I'd seen him tinkering with these boards on all the project nights, and when he brought in the MBTA board, there was something about it that just gripped me and was just fascinating. It was like it's taking this very complex system and kind of distilling it down to its most like basic essence. It's like taking the heartbeat of the city and being able to display it just in this little square. And so it's from there I was like, I just want one for myself. How do I get that?
Totally.
And he was getting these circuit boards made. You can now get circuit boards made in very low quantities through prototyping services in China. And so he got a couple of them. I learned how to solder surface mount components through that process. And as we were doing that, people were kind of showing interest in what we were doing. And we talked to the owner of a map store in Somerville, which is Ward Maps. It's also known as MBTA Gifts. They're the official gift shop of the MBTA. Really awesome place. It's between Porter Square and Harvard Square. Definitely check it out if you like maps, which I think you do. And so he was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get a couple of them, see how people like them. I ended up hand soldering a batch of 10 of them, and I did bring some show and tell. I actually have one of the original 10. This is like a hand stamped little white box.
Wow.
And then we have the little like setup code. I can't really see it too well. There's a little setup like QR code.
Yeah.
And then here's the board. It was tiny. It's like 4x4.
That is so cool.
Yeah. And Yeah, and these were all, hand soldered, and I can still see all the little like imperfections from the from the soldering. I designed a little wooden stand for it.
Oh.
And it was, and it's everything, it's flat pack, so it snaps apart and, it slots together. And everything had to fit in this little 4x4 box. Yeah, and so then from there, he posted a picture of one of them on his Twitter. Somebody from the Boston Globe saw it and added the Traintrackr into like a holiday gift guide, and we sold like 150 that winter. And as I say, the rest is history. It's been that was our first holiday season. Now we've been through 2 more, and we've sold over 2,000 boards.
Wow, that is fantastic. I'm so glad you also brought the visual, because I feel like what's amazing about Traintrackr is they're just so brilliantly beautiful, and that they light up, and they're so cool and tiny, which is also.
Yeah. And now this is our I don't have it plugged in, which I obviously should have. Oh gosh, my background is all blurred out. So this is our New York City board, obviously a lot bigger. This shows the full MTA system. And this one, we have a much nicer box now. Custom, you can't, geez, I'm sorry for all the blurring. But this is now retailing at the MoMA design store in New York City.
Wow, that is super cool and makes sense. It's a good fitting place for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see the kind of the reaction that we've gotten at MoMA. We've sent a couple units overseas to the MoMA design store in Hong Kong and in Tokyo, and we're going to be selling the New York Traintrackrs at the MoMA store in Tokyo in the near future as well. Fingers crossed that we'll be doing a Tokyo Traintrackr in the near future. That's going to be a bit of a challenge, but yeah. So that's kind of where we're at currently. So that's the very brief history of Traintrackr.
That's amazing. And I had no idea about the Boston Globe piece, but I do know that now, perhaps because I Googled it, a few times, it comes up as my constant Instagram ads. And I thought, I have to get this for my apartment. So anyways, I think it's such a brilliant idea, and they're just so cool. As someone who hasn't had a lot of like fabrication, Arduino experience, it makes me want to move outside of software and into more physical materials. So anyways, you mentioned the Tokyo Traintrackr, potential Traintrackr iteration, but I wonder, so has there been any difficulty pulling the geographic data for these Traintrackr creations?
Yeah, so we've had every data system is different. The way that each of the systems presents their data is a little bit different. So they're all kind of unique in that sense. The MTA was definitely the most difficult that we've had. But at the end of the day, the issues are fairly limited in that it is a board designed to display one thing. And, once we, if, you couldn't, it's like, it comes out of the box, it shows MBTA data, for the Boston Traintrackr.
Yeah.
It is designed, the layout of the LEDs is designed to show, MBTA data. So once we solve that, it's, that's the extent of the technical hurdles we have. And that's all fine and dandy until we came out with our first weather map, which was a map of Massachusetts. And once we did that, then we're able to show precipitation data, wind speed data. We can show animations of that, of past data over time, which is really cool to look at. But the byproduct of that is that now we open the door and we have a board that can show any geospatial data. And that's where, obviously that's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
But, it's like, then that opens the door for, we have people that say like, oh, well, can you show this on it? Oh, can you show that on it? And then it's like, okay, well, does that data source actually exist? How is that data source being formatted? How is, it's so that is the exciting problem that we've gotten into with our maps. And so we now have all of our maps right now are just white LEDs. They can modulate their brightness individually. So you can show intensity of rain, but what we're coming out with, hopefully at some point in the second half of 2022, is a full color and RGB map of the US. And I can actually show you a picture of that, of the current prototype. It's not necessarily going to look like that. Let's see, share screen here. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you can see the different. You have to forgive me. I'm not sure. The colors are pulled from the radar data, so I'm not sure what they exactly correspond to. Like which one is the most intense versus the least intense. But yeah. So that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Say that again.
Is it visualizing elevation data, or is it just giving?
No, it's visualizing. I believe it's rain intensity, precipitation data.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of the position that we're in, and so the question is then like, so you have this map that can show anything. What do what does it show out of the box, just like by default? And we've had people really like weather. There's a big weather tracking community, so we definitely want to show weather out of the box. But then rather than saying, okay, these are like the this is all it can show, we want to enable our community to be able to to show what they want on their thing. So it's not necessarily issues of us having compatibility issues with certain data. You can say, if you have data for your business or for this thing that you're really passionate about, you can we'll give you the tools to be able to upload that to your own board. So you can sort that out yourself. And if that's really cool and you like it, and you think other people will like it, we also want to be able to empower you to share that with the rest of the community.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the exciting part. That's the part that still needs to be sorted out. But yeah, so what I would love to hear, and obviously we still want to like make those most exciting things available, by default. So it's, as of right now, it's weather, but I stay up at night thinking about what sort of cool things could be displayed on that. And I'm sure that you or your listeners, might have some thoughts as to that. And I don't want to, put you on the spot and, have you tell me cool things to display on it, but some things that I can think of that I really love birding. I really love nature and birds. I know that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a system called eBird. And so that, you can track bird sightings. And if you display those geospatially, you can actually follow the migration of a migratory species as people, self-report. So that's really exciting to me. Being able to visualize something where it's like, something that's crowdsourced, that it's like you don't see, like you can see an oriole, or you can see a hummingbird or something. You're like, oh, that's cool. They're here right now. They're at my location right now. That's my one data point.
Yeah.
But being able to like expand, and it's the same thing as the subway tracker of, being able to look at this entire system, as a whole at once from the, the comfort of your kitchen or from your office desk. Yeah, so that's that's what I think is the kind of the most exciting challenge we have right now. But there, that is not to say, there are specific difficulties we've had with existing products and existing, data sets. As I said, the MTA has required that, we have had to create an intermediary server to handle to convert the data, the arrival data, and then process it. I'm not an expert on the data processing side, but I know that was a big a big headache for Richard. All the data is different in terms of whether you get arrivals or departures, or specific locations of the trains. Some of them give deviance from a preset schedule. So it all involves writing custom code to actually get exact train location data.
Oh, wow.
The other thing is that some of them are rounded to the minute, and on our first boards, the black one I showed you, and then the batch of 150, which was the green ones. They would update every minute because we would get updates every minute, or round to the minute. So we actually have, in some cases, like in the London case, for the London board, for example, we actually stagger it. So even though the data only comes in every minute, to give it a bit more, visual intrigue, we stagger when the different lights light up, even though they could all light up at once, and then you need to be like waiting for for the next minute, and then they all change over. They kind of stagger, so they move in and out of it. They don't move in and out, but when they actually change is a bit randomized.
Oh, I hadn't thought of the complications in terms of the data processing. That makes sense, but wow, that would make sense.
Yeah, and the other side of that is the hardware side of it. So some systems, like Boston, there are, I think, only 4 stations that actually have multiple lines intersecting. So for that, we have the vast majority of them are single line stations. So hardware wise, each one of our board is going to be single color LEDs, and then then we can have but for example, BART in San Francisco, the vast majority of their stations are multiple lines running in parallel. So then the question is, do you have, at some points, do you have 4 rows of LEDs running side by side? And then would you do, if you want to do both directions, you would have like 8 LEDs all next to each other for each stop.
Yeah.
So then you just do, 2 RGB LEDs, one for each direction. So you can show any color on each LED. And that obviously affects what happens when you have multiple trains right back to back. If they're taking up the same kind of slot of in between 2 stations, how do you display that? So all of that goes into the hardware that we choose, and how we process the software are somewhat intertwined.
Interesting. And I mean, the weather one is so incredible, but I feel like I hadn't even processed how many other live data sets you could be using on the, I have so few examples that I even know of physical map renderings where and they're also live, and you can have that generative data. It's just, that's so cool. I mean, between like mobility data or there's a website called Kaggle that has a bunch of really cool data sets that I use for different like CS projects, so I can visualize cool information. And they have like UFO sightings, and they have, which I love. And
that'd be great.
Yeah, exactly.
What I want to visualize is the NORAD every year does the Santa tracker.
Yeah,
I would love that. I mean, and the one that I always talk about, I mean, and one that would be really interesting for like, a very short period every 4 years would be election, prediction, polling data, and to see kind of how that changes over time. That would be really interesting. And the one that I think would be, that's really salient right now, but nobody really, wants to hear about is, live COVID heat maps.
Sure, of course, yeah.
It's kind of a hard sell to get people excited about about that, but
that's interesting.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I would love, and I think that we've had a lot of success with Traintrackr specifically, with subway data, and it's going to be, we want to try to kind of capture the essence of what is exciting about it. The live data, the functional art, the having something that is raw and exposed, but still elegant, and kind of apply that to other types of data. So we've done that to a small extent with the weather data, but I think this will definitely be exciting to see just kind of live data more generally. And I think that there are a lot of examples that could be interesting to people, that have data that don't necessarily want to share it externally, but maybe with their team internally, of like, where your customers buying your products, having things show up on a map, something like that, that could be used as as a sales tool, just to get people excited about about the company they're working on or the project they're working on. Another thing I'd really like, something that's just been in my head for a while now that I would love, is I love clocks. And I've always described, I say that there's kind of an analogy, or a line that you can draw between the Traintrackr and a nice clock. It's people have said, we've gotten good response on our our marketing materials, but you always have people on Facebook that love to comment negative things, or and it's always important to listen to those people. And actually, when we in the class, when I was TAing, it was PXDD, product and experience design for desirability. One of the guest speakers was the founder of Onewheel. I forget what his name was, but he said something that has stuck with me, which was that when they designed the first Onewheel, and their market was people who already snowboarded and surfed, and they were these extreme sports, not necessarily extreme sports like hardcore people, but they liked they liked boarding already. And so he got feedback, the people that would message them and the people they would talk to that were their customers would say, okay, we want something that's has longer range, bigger batteries, has like a bigger tire that can handle bumpier terrain, needs to be more resilient to mud and dirt. But what he said was that by going to CES or conferences or whatever, talking to people, showing people the product and learning about people that said, no, that's not really for me, by not just saying, okay, whatever, I'm gonna shut out the haters, not listen to people that are saying no, but by saying, okay, why is it that you wouldn't ride this? And they're like, it's too bulky to bring on a train, or it's like, I'm not, it's not really sleek, it's whatever it is, it's too big. They ended up developing the Pint, which is now their most popular offering, and it's something that's designed for commuters and designed for people in the city. And so by listening to why people say no, then you can learn a lot from that. That is all to say, when people comment on Facebook and they're like, well, why I have an app on my phone that tells me all this information.
Oh, but it's not as
It's not, but it's why do people still own clocks then? It's you have the time on your phone, but people still buy, a beautiful clock and hang it on their wall. For me, it's the Dieter Rams Braun clock that's like, there's ultra simple, elegant, and that's, it's a piece of reflective design. It's something that reflects how, how we want to present ourselves to the rest of the world, essentially. A lot of people put it on their desks at work and say that it's, people tell them how cool they think it is, or it's, it's a conversation starter. But yeah, so that's, I really like clocks, and I think that having a PCB clock that could show some other data at the same time would be really interesting.
Yeah.
I would love to have a clock that could double as a lunar calendar, which is fairly simple in terms of the data, but being able to see moon phase at nighttime and serve as like a nightlight almost would be really cool.
Yeah, interesting. Huh. Wow, well, it's cool that you're learning from what people like and don't like about Traintrackr. Yeah, you can adapt it, and I feel like you probably will get reach outs from this. Not that I have this huge viewer base, but the map nerds, will sometimes listen to my program, and I feel like people will reach out with all these interesting use cases. So, for software-oriented folks like myself, I mentioned Traintrackr is so novel in that it's a physical way of displaying geographic data. But for some of us who maybe have more software experience, but less, physical fabrication experience, what would you say is the best way to sort of jump in and get started? And
I'd say the best way to get started is to find a local makerspace. As I mentioned, Richard, my business partner, and I met at the Cambridge Hackspace. Richard is actually the founder of Cambridge Hackspace, and he has since moved back to the UK. I am now treasurer and vice president of the Hackspace, but it's really awesome. I joined it when I was working with another project, and we needed access to a laser cutter. Did some Googling, and the Hackspace came up, and I walked in one day and met some of the members. I came there to learn one specific skill, to do one specific thing, and then at a project night, just like seeing the circuit boards Richard was working on, a drone one of the other members was working on, some Arduino stuff, and it's like there was my friend DC, who's now the maker in residence down at District Hall in the Seaport, was working on like a smart gumball machine, and I was like, this is just like the coolest, and all these people were just like so willing to share. It's like you ask questions and they're like, yeah, like let me like write down like how I did this, or like if it was like, oh cool, this is this project I want to work on, it's like, here's how you get started. And it's like, well, I don't know how to solder, I don't know anything about circuitry, I don't know anything about writing Arduino code, I don't know like any of this stuff. But it's like, yeah, like these people can like help me learn it. And it's like, obviously, like you need to be willing to to reciprocate and share what you do know. It's not a one-way street, but as long as you're willing to to be a participant in this community, then people are very willing to give back. And I've found that to be true of not just this makerspace, but of every general makerspace that I've run into. And these spaces are all over the place, and you would have no idea that they're there. I was involved with the Hackspace, myself and our president, Jonathan Bitterman, who you know as well, Jennifer. We helped organize an event this past summer called Fab 16. It was part of the Fab Foundation's annual Fab Summit. And it was kind of a coming together of a lot of the maker spaces in the city to show, the community that these places are here. And they, they're available to the community. They're not just for tech nerds. They're not just, it's if you're a, community member that wants to learn Arduino, if you're a, store owner that wants to build a new sign for your shop, whatever it is, if you're a homeowner that wants to replace your lighting fixture, then it's like these spaces are here. The president of the Fab Foundation, Sherry Lassiter, who's an awesome person. The Fab Foundation is linked with the Center for Bits and Atoms at MIT, and in talking with Neil Gershenfeld, who's the head of that center, Sherry noticed that the number of maker spaces is doubling every year and a half. Wow. Which tracks.
Transistors, right? Isn't that like?
What's that? Yes. It tracks Moore's law.
Yeah.
So they call it, and in Neil's most recent book, he dubs it Lass's law, for Sherry Lassiter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so it's really exciting, and it's this third revolution, this third technological revolution is upon us right now, and empowering people to have access to this technology. Kind of the thing that stuck out to me the most in reading Neil's most recent book was he talked about when Moore's law was recognized in the 60s, compared to during Obama's administration. I'm not sure exactly at what point during the administration, but at one point he says, access to a computer and to the internet is not just a luxury. It's essential. It's the difference between it, that's like 50 years.
Yeah.
So people who didn't have access to that are essentially 50 years behind. We now we're recognizing this growth of fabrication spaces, and spaces that have spaces like the maker spaces at Harvard or MIT are amazing, have incredible facilities. Spaces like the Cambridge Hack Space are empowered by an awesome community, aren't as large, but we have volunteers that make it run really really smoothly. We have awesome equipment, but making sure that proliferates, and making it as this movement increases, the spaces are not going to need to be as large. I'm in my basement. Before we started recording, we were talking about how I have my printer and a PCB mill right behind me, and I can make this is a smart pill case that that can detect, that can tell you when to take your pills, detect when they've been taken, send that information back to your phone. And this entire thing was made in my basement.
Wow.
So making sure that people have access to the skills needed to to use these machines is essential. And if we can do this work now, then then this is something that can be for everyone. So that's a bit of a tangent, but definitely find your local makerspace. They're out there, they exist. Yeah. And if you have some skills to bring to the table, share them, because there are a lot of people like myself who know a lot more about hardware than software. And so, yeah, it's that is my thought on where to start.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Seriously, I don't even sometimes know where to turn on that spectrum of things. So I appreciate it. I, my final, I could keep you here all day, but
Yeah.
I obviously won't. So my final question that I ask of all of my interviews is to describe a time where you were lost, whether that was physically or metaphorically in your life or career, and how you found your way back again.
Yeah. So the most obvious example I can think of is my background, my education is in biology, in neuroscience and ecology. I studied biology at Bard College. I took, kind of interdisciplinary biology courses, but my senior project was in behavioral neuroscience. I worked with zebrafish, which is a very popular model organism, kind of similar to a lab rat, but it has a number of advantages, and so that's kind of the way things are shifting, is towards the zebrafish model. And there were a number of aspects of that project that really resonated with me. And it was, at that point, it was the hardest I'd ever worked on any project for that, extended amount of time. It pushed me to my limits, and it, it was incredibly formative. But, I came out of that realizing, I can't work in a lab the rest of my life. But one thing that really stuck with me was a paper that I read my junior year. So zebrafish have this unique, and zebrafish have about like 60 to 70% similarity of their connectome to humans, and that might be wrong, or that that might be updated since, but there are analogous pathways, for 60 to 70% of the pathways in a zebrafish head. So they have this unique characteristic where, until a couple weeks after they are fertilized, so in their larval stage, their heads are see-through, so you can actually see their brains under a microscope. And if you put if that strain has a fluorescent indicator in their brains, then you can put them under what's called confocal light sheet microscopy, and you can actually create Z-stacks, where stacks of slices of images, to get then you assign a thickness to those images and create three-dimensional pixels or voxels, and create a 3D image of a living animal's brain. But because they're alive, and you can get three-dimensional videos of how do I skipped a bit here. You can, with the fluorescent indicators, if you shine a UV laser, like a UV laser sheet on a specific slice, as you capture that image, that neuron that has that indicator in it will glow when a neurotransmitter is released. So you can capture real-time brain activity in a living animal, and this is all to say, this was mind-blowing to me. And you read through this whole thing, and it's like, wow, this is incredible. Like it's like describing what you should be looking at, and then it shows you like the video, and it's like 3 2D videos side by side, and you're like, what? Where's the 3D video? And it's like, no, that is how you show a 3D video on a 2D screen, is like 3 simultaneous cross sections. And so it's like there was this, to me, that was a huge disconnect between this incredibly cutting edge science that was going on and a way to actually display it. And so when I graduated, I was waiting to hear back about whether a lab that I'd worked at in the past was going to have funding to hire me full time. And in the meantime, I started, working with my friend on this project that we were working with a research consultant and trying to display 3D imaging data in 3 dimensions using a reflective technique called Pepper's Ghost. And there was, when I started working on the project with him, it's like he was working on this undergrad. This is, my best friend. He was working on this project undergrad at Hampshire College, and this resonates with exactly what the issue that I had just described. And it's like, I don't know what I can do to help on this project, but I want to help with it. It was like, well, there's we have a gap. We don't have any hardware to display this on. I was like, okay, that's I'll see what I can do. Like I sketched something out. I'm like, okay, I have this sketch of this design that should work. I don't know what to do with it. It's like, okay, I guess I'll learn CAD to realize it in 3D. Then it's like, okay, I have this CAD model. What do I do with it? Okay, I taught myself about 3D printing, and I printed a model of it. And it's like that moment where you have something that you thought of, and then seeing it in front of you was just like mind blowing. It was game changing. And at that point, I was hooked on product design, and just the problem solving of entrepreneurship was really awesome. And and I think back to my best friend and I in his mom's attic, when we were like a year out of college, and like trying to all the stupid mistakes we made, and all the things that we got right. It's where we have skill sets that naturally mesh together. It was really awesome. And that that to me was that big, how I found myself after feeling lost, of like, I just studied biology for 4 years, and I'm working with researchers, and I'm working with like research data, but like it's that was the big finding myself moment, I would say.
Wow, that's such an interesting background. I think you'd mentioned at one point we met during the class, and you'd mentioned that your background is in biology, but that's such an interesting way that you sort of found 3D and then fabrication. Such a cool
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fun tangent I will share is that I mentioned in the past that I like birds. I mentioned that I took kind of an interdisciplinary background. I was taking a number of ornithology classes my senior year. And I was doing some cool work with GIS and bird location data, which was really fun. But at the same time that I was waiting to hear back from that job, I was applying for a position out in Arizona, monitoring like goshawk populations, which are these awesome birds. And you need to wear a hard hat when you're searching for them, because they'll dive and aim for your eyes and head. But I was like one of the final 2 candidates for this position, and I would have had to, like, the day that I graduated, I would have had to get in my car and drive out to Arizona, and I ended up not getting it. And like still to this day, it's like I'm thinking like that would just be I would have never done any of this. It would have changed my whole whole trajectory. But yeah, it's funny. It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
But I still love birds.
Amazing. And it's great that you know about eBird too, which I think is such a cool
Yeah.
theory.
It's really cool to I've turned them off in the past couple of years, but I used to get their rare bird alerts.
Oh,
Yeah, it would tell you like you can set them up for like your county or your city, where it's like wherever anybody like says like there's a bald eagle in Boston or whatever it is, then it'll let you know, and people like somebody sets the location and people flock to it.
wow. No pun intended. Yeah. Interesting.
And sometimes it's really cool because it's like there's like there's an owl nest, so that's something that you can like easily go to and it's gonna be there. Yeah, but other times when it's like there is a bird of prey at some location, it's like there's a sighting. It's like the chances of you seeing the same bird are fairly minimal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There was a sea eagle that was seen in like somewhere by Gloucester, I think, and that's a bird that had flown from. This was like a couple weeks ago. That bird had flown like from Russia.
Wow.
Like it had like lost its way, and it's and the thing is, the article was saying this bird was clearly like lost, or it had, it's strewn away from its pack. It's like, I think that's where they got it wrong, because not all who wander are lost. I think that bird was just having a good time.
Yeah, it's exploring. Yeah, that's the Russian tourist. Yeah,
yeah, he's about halfway through the plot of a Disney movie.
Right. That is so cool, interesting, and I forgot that you have this biology background. But such an interesting story. I love this interview. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you soon, and let me know if you're TAing any other classes. I'd love to be a part, and yeah, I'll send you a recording of this when it's done. And thank you so much again.
Yeah, please do.